Hollywood loves to polish its image, shaping movie stars into icons the public is meant to admire. But behind the cameras, the red carpets, and the carefully managed interviews, some celebrities carried something far darker than the audience ever saw. Hidden recordings, resurfaced audio, documented confrontations, and archived statements reveal a truth many Americans never expected. Several well-known stars built their careers while holding deeply racist views, some quietly, some openly, some only exposed decades later. This countdown revisits those documented moments, the controversies that rocked American media, and the industry reactions that forced Hollywood to confront its own history. Some careers survived, others didn't. All left a mark. As we move down this list, ask yourself, how many of these celebrities did you grow up watching, and how many of their racist actions were kept from the public for years? 15. Mel Gibson. Mel Gibson once stood at the absolute peak of Hollywood power, a leading man admired for his charisma, intensity, and box office dominance. From major franchises to Oscar-winning directing achievements, he became one of the industry's most bankable talents. For many American viewers, he embodied the rugged, heroic image Hollywood loved to celebrate. But behind the scenes, long before the public knew, industry insiders had already whispered about temper issues, outbursts, and comments that hinted at something much darker. Those rumors remained largely contained until the evidence finally surfaced. His career changed forever when a traffic stop in the early 2000s erupted into a scandal that made global headlines. The incident included remarks targeting Jewish communities, which were fully documented in police reports and widely covered by major American media outlets. Years later, leaked recordings of arguments with his then-partner captured additional racist and misogynistic language, further reinforcing concerns that his earlier remarks were not isolated moments. Each event intensified public backlash, bringing a wave of industry condemnation and prompting studios to distance themselves. Hollywood's reaction was swift and severe. Projects were paused, partnerships dissolved, and Gibson's once secure place in the industry collapsed almost overnight. Many Americans who grew up watching his earlier films struggled to reconcile his on-screen persona with the documented actions and language that contradicted it so sharply. For years, his appearances were met with criticism, divided reactions, and ongoing debates about accountability versus redemption. Despite attempts at apologies and occasional returns to directing, the shadow of these incidents has never fully faded. Gibson became one of the clearest examples of how racism, when exposed through undeniable evidence, can transform a career that once seemed untouchable. Whether audiences believe he has changed or not, his legacy in American pop culture remains permanently complicated. His rise and fall continue to serve as a reminder of how quickly public perception can shift when private behavior becomes part of the historical record. 14. John Wayne. John Wayne remains one of the most iconic symbols of classic American cinema, the towering cowboy, the embodiment of rugged individualism, and a defining figure of Hollywood's golden age. For decades, audiences viewed him as the ultimate hero. His films shaped the Western genre, influenced American masculinity, and built a cultural legacy that still echoes through film schools, museums, and discussions of American identity. But behind the patriotic imagery and the mythic roles he played, Wayne carried views that would later ignite controversy across the nation. The most publicly documented example is his interview with Playboy magazine in the late 1970s, where he expressed racist and white supremacist viewpoints. These comments were widely available in print long before the Internet era and resurfaced repeatedly as national conversations about race evolved. In that interview, Wayne dismissed civil rights concerns and defended discriminatory attitudes that, even at the time, were met with criticism. Decades later, as younger generations encountered the archived article, the backlash reignited on social media, prompting a new wave of scrutiny of his legacy. Hollywood has long been divided about how to handle Wayne's image. Some defenders argue that he was a product of his era, while others emphasized that his statements were extreme even by the standards of his time. Cultural institutions faced pressure, including public debates about whether an airport named after him should keep his name. These conversations reflected the broader shift in American culture, the growing willingness to revisit historical heroes through a more critical lens. In film history, Wayne's contributions remain significant, yet his documented remarks created a lasting stain that many Americans can no longer separate from his achievements. His story reveals how the preservation of public interviews and written statements allows modern audiences to reassess public figures with clarity. Wayne's case demonstrates that racism, even when expressed decades ago, can continue to shape reputations, influence institutional decisions, and provoke cultural reevaluation. His legacy now stands as a complex intersection of cinematic greatness and deeply troubling personal beliefs. 13. Paula Deen. Paula Deen rose to national fame as one of America's most recognizable celebrity chefs. With a warm Southern persona, best-selling cookbooks, and multiple hit shows on the Food Network, she built an empire that blended comfort food with a nostalgic image of Southern hospitality. For years, her brand symbolized approachability, family tradition, and the charm of old-fashioned cooking. But that same public image unraveled when allegations surfaced that revealed a troubling pattern beneath the polished persona. Her downfall began in the early 2013 period, when legal documents from a lawsuit involving a former employee became public. In her deposition, Deen admitted to using racial slurs in the past, a revelation that ignited immediate national outrage. The incident went viral, amplified by major American news outlets and social media. Additional allegations surfaced, claiming she had tolerated racially insensitive workplace environments. While some claims were disputed, the information in the deposition was indisputable, and public reaction was swift. The fallout was one of the most dramatic collapses in modern celebrity culture. The Food Network cut ties with her. Major sponsors, including major retailers, ended partnerships. Cookbook releases were halted, exhibitions canceled, and her public appearances shifted from triumphant to defensive. In multiple interviews following the controversy, she attempted to explain her past behavior, insisting she was not racist and expressing regret for her language. But for many Americans, the damage had been done. The controversy sparked broader conversations about the romanticization of the Old South, racial stereotypes, and how nostalgia can sometimes mask deeper issues. Deen's empire never fully recovered to its former scale, though she continues to have a smaller presence in the culinary world through independent ventures. Her story remains a cautionary example of how quickly a beloved public figure can lose credibility when racist language or behavior is documented. It shows that in the age of digital media, where depositions, interviews, and court documents can be shared instantly, past actions carry long-term consequences. Deen's rise and fall continue to shape discussions about accountability, celebrity rehabilitation, and the cultural impact of racial insensitivity in American entertainment. 12. Michael Richards. Michael Richards became a household name through his role as Kramer on Seinfeld, a performance that helped define 90s American television. His physical comedy, eccentric energy, and unmistakable timing turned him into one of the decade's most beloved sitcom personalities. For years, audiences associated him with innocence, humor, and the quirky charm that made the show a cultural landmark. But the warmth of that image collapsed abruptly when a single incident exposed a darker, deeply disturbing side that many viewers had never imagined. In the mid-2000s, during a stand-up comedy performance at the Laugh Factory in Los Angeles, Richards directed a racist tirade at black audience members after being heckled. The outburst, filled with slurs and hateful remarks, was captured on video and quickly spread across major American news networks and online platforms. The recording left no room for interpretation, no ambiguity about context, and no possible dismissal as a misunderstanding. It was raw, explicit, and impossible to ignore. The fallout was immediate and severe. Richards issued a public apology on national television, acknowledging the harm he caused and expressing remorse. But for many Americans, the apology could not outweigh the graphic nature of the incident. Hollywood distanced itself almost instantly. Offers declined, opportunities evaporated, and his once promising post-Seinfeld career disappeared nearly overnight. The event became a defining moment in discussions about racism in comedy and the limits of heat-of-the-moment excuses. Cultural analysts still point to Richards's tirade as one of the earliest viral scandals that demonstrated how digital recording could permanently change a celebrity's trajectory. It revealed the dangers of relying on nostalgia or a beloved character to shield someone from accountability. For many viewers, the contrast between Kramer's playful innocence and Richards' documented outburst created lasting discomfort. Years later, the incident remains a central reference point in conversations about celebrity racism, public forgiveness, and the consequences of recorded behavior. Richards' career never recovered, and his legacy in American pop culture remains overshadowed by that single night, a reminder that even one moment, when captured and broadcast, can redefine an entire public identity. 11. Liam Neeson. Liam Neeson built his reputation as one of Hollywood's most respected dramatic actors, known for his commanding presence and emotional depth. From period dramas to blockbuster thrillers, he became a symbol of intense, empathetic storytelling. American audiences embraced him as a dignified leading man, someone whose performances carried moral weight and sincerity. For decades, his image remained largely free from controversy. But that changed when an interview revealed a deeply troubling confession that shocked fans and critics alike. In the late 20-teens, during a promotional interview for a film, Neeson recounted a story from decades earlier in which a close friend had been assaulted. He described wandering the streets hoping to provoke an encounter with a black man so he could retaliate. The statement was delivered unprompted, and the racial implication was unmistakable. Major American media outlets published the quotes immediately, triggering a wave of outrage. Viewers were stunned not only by the content of the confession, but also by the self-awareness that he had once harbored such violent, racially charged thoughts. Hollywood's response was swift and divided. Some condemned the comments outright, calling them dangerous and revealing of deep-seated prejudice. Others framed the confession as part of a larger conversation about acknowledging past racism and confronting personal flaws. Neeson apologized publicly, expressing shame, emphasizing that he sought help at the time, and stating that his story was meant to illustrate how destructive hatred can become when left unchecked. Still, the incident overshadowed his promotional tour, led to canceled appearances, and caused widespread debate across entertainment networks. The revelation forced many Americans to reconsider the actor's legacy. Supporters pointed to his long career of humanitarian advocacy and charitable work. Critics argued that the confession reflected a mindset rooted in racial bias, regardless of time past. The discussion extended into broader questions of redemption, accountability, and the cost of transparency in modern celebrity culture. Although Neeson continued to work, the incident remains a defining chapter in his public narrative. It demonstrates how a single interview, when it exposes something undeniable and deeply uncomfortable, can permanently alter how Hollywood and the American public perceive a figure once associated with dignity and integrity. 10. Roseanne Barr. Roseanne Barr was once considered one of the most influential comedic voices in American television. Her sitcom, Roseanne, reshaped the landscape of network TV, offering a raw, working-class perspective that resonated deeply with families across the country. She became a defining figure of late 80s and 90s pop culture, outspoken, unfiltered, and widely admired for her ability to blend humor with social commentary. For years, her legacy remained tied to that groundbreaking success. But decades later, a single online post would overshadow everything she had built. In the late 2010s, shortly after ABC revived Roseanne to massive ratings, Barr made a tweet comparing former White House advisor Valerie Jarrett, a black Iranian-American woman to an ape. The remark was instantly condemned across political and entertainment circles. Major American news outlets covered the story non-stop, emphasizing how the language used carried a long history of racist dehumanization. Within hours, ABC canceled the entire series, despite its high ratings, citing the network's zero-tolerance stance on racist rhetoric. The fallout was one of the most rapid corporate responses in modern entertainment history. Cast members publicly distanced themselves. Crew members expressed shock and disappointment. Sponsors praised the swift cancellation. Online discussions split between those who viewed the comment as inexcusable and those who argued Barr's intent had been misunderstood. Barr apologized, stating she did not know Jarrett's race and attributing the incident partly to medication. But for many Americans, the explanation did little to repair the damage, especially given a pattern of controversial statements she had made in earlier years. The series was rebranded as The Connors without her involvement, and Hollywood largely closed its doors to new collaborations. Barr continued making appearances on smaller platforms, but her mainstream presence dissolved almost immediately. Her story remains a defining example of how, in the age of social media, a single documented post can erase decades of professional achievement. It also reflects a broader shift in the American entertainment industry's willingness to respond decisively to racist language, even when it comes from someone once considered an icon. Roseanne's legacy, once defined by cultural innovation, is now permanently intertwined with one tweet that changed everything. 9. Hulk Hogan. Hulk Hogan was once one of the most recognizable faces in American pop culture. As the charismatic centerpiece of the professional wrestling boom, he transcended the ring and became a mainstream icon. Kids wore his colors, adults knew his catchphrases, and Hollywood embraced him as a charismatic crossover personality. For decades, he symbolized larger-than-life, entertainment, strength, optimism, and a cartoon-like heroism that defined 80s and 90s American nostalgia. But the same fame that lifted him to legendary status would later magnify a scandal that revealed a side of him most fans had never imagined. The turning point came when leaked audio from a private recording surfaced publicly in the mid-2010s. In the tape, Hogan used racist slurs while discussing his daughter's dating life. The content was explicit, unmistakable, and instantly went viral across major American news networks. The release of the recording didn't leave room for reinterpretation or context. It was Hogan's voice, his words, and years of carefully crafted public image shattered in minutes. The fallout was immediate. World Wrestling Entertainment terminated his contract, removed him from the Hall of Fame, scrubbed his merchandise, and erased references to him from their website. Fans were stunned. Many who grew up with Hogan as a heroic figure experienced the revelation as a cultural shock, struggling to connect the beloved wrestling icon with the man heard on the recording. For weeks, entertainment outlets and sports analysts debated whether a career built on inspiration could survive such a blatant act of racism. Hogan later issued multiple apologies, acknowledging the pain his words caused and expressing regret for what he described as a dark and misguided period of his life. Over time, WWE reinstated him to the Hall of Fame, emphasizing themes of education and redemption. But even with attempts to rebuild his reputation, a significant portion of the American public continues to view him through the lens of that leaked recording. His story remains one of the most high-profile examples of how a private conversation once made public can permanently redefine a celebrity's legacy. Hogan's rise, fall, and partial return form a complex chapter in discussions about forgiveness, accountability, and the evolving expectations placed on public figures in American entertainment. 8. Mark Wahlberg. Mark Wahlberg's rise in Hollywood is one of the most dramatic transformations in modern American celebrity culture. From a troubled Boston youth to a globally recognized actor and producer, he reshaped his public identity through determination, business savvy, and undeniable on-screen presence. Audiences came to associate him with gritty dramas, action blockbusters, and a genuine relatability that made him a standout figure in American entertainment. But behind the later success lies a documented history that continues to shadow conversations about his legacy. During his teenage years in the 1980s, Wahlberg was involved in multiple incidents that remain part of the public record. The most widely discussed centered on an assault in which racial slurs were used, details documented in police reports and court filings. Another earlier case involved harassment of black children, also noted in official records. While Wahlberg has long stated that these events came from a troubled and misguided period of his youth, and while he has expressed remorse in various interviews, the publicly archived details remain a recurring part of his narrative. Hollywood's reaction to his past has been mixed. For many years, Wahlberg was celebrated primarily for his reinvention, moving from music to film, then to producing critically acclaimed projects. Yet as discussions about race, justice, and accountability intensified in the 2010s, the documented events from his early life resurfaced repeatedly in American media. Critics argued that his success highlighted disparities in how society treats young offenders differently based on race, while supporters noted his decades of philanthropy and efforts to distance himself from his teenage actions. Wahlberg's attempts at legal pardon stirred further debate, prompting renewed examination of the original cases. Ultimately, he withdrew the request, acknowledging that seeking a pardon hurt people affected by his past. That decision was viewed by some as a step toward accountability, while others argued that the harm could not be undone. Today, Wahlberg stands as a complex figure in American pop culture, both a symbol of personal reinvention and a reminder that documented racist behavior, even from youth, does not fade from public memory. His story continues to fuel conversations about redemption, responsibility, and how much someone's past should shape their legacy in Hollywood. 7. Justin Bieber. Justin Bieber became one of the most recognizable global pop stars of the 2010s, rising from a Canadian teenager discovered on YouTube to a household name across the United States. His early success was meteoric, sold-out arenas, chart-topping singles, and an intensely loyal fan base. In American pop culture, he represented youthful energy, mainstream appeal, and the modern digital age celebrity. But as his fame grew, so did public scrutiny, and soon, documented incidents from his past resurfaced and challenged the carefully managed pop idol image. Two separate leaked videos from Bieber's early teenage years triggered widespread backlash. In the first, he told a racist joke using a well-known slur. In the second, he altered lyrics from one of his hit songs to include the same term while referencing the Ku Klux Klan. These recordings, published by major American media outlets, were undeniable evidence of racially offensive behavior. For many viewers, especially black fans who had supported his rise, the footage felt deeply hurtful. The fallout was immediate. Civil rights organizations, journalists, and fans voiced outrage, questioning how a young star surrounded by industry professionals could have been comfortable using such language. Bieber issued public apologies, describing the videos as moments from his adolescence when he lacked understanding and maturity. He acknowledged the racist nature of the remarks, expressed remorse, and stated he had since committed himself to learning, growth, and accountability. Prominent figures in the music industry, including several black artists, later supported his efforts at education and reconciliation. Hollywood and the American music industry responded with cautious acceptance. While the scandal did not end his career, it reshaped his public narrative. Bieber began speaking openly about personal change, faith, and emotional development. He also collaborated with black artists, participated in social justice-focused discussions, and publicly condemned racism in later years. Still, the leaked footage remains a permanent part of his history, a reminder of how early behavior, once recorded, never truly disappears in the digital age. Bieber's case continues to spark debate about youth, accountability, privilege, and the long road toward rebuilding trust with audiences. 6. Duane Chapman. Duane Chapman became one of the most recognizable figures in American reality television during the 2000s. As the star of Dog the Bounty Hunter, he presented himself as a hardened yet morally driven pursuer of fugitives. A man who mixed toughness with appeals for personal redemption. Viewers connected with the raw, emotional intensity of the show, the family involvement, the confrontations, and the blend of law enforcement drama with spiritual messaging. For years, Chapman cultivated the image of a man who believed in second chances, but that carefully shaped persona was shattered by a scandal that exposed a deeply troubling private moment. The controversy erupted when an audio recording leaked in the late 2000s. In the tape, Chapman repeatedly used racist slurs during a conversation with his son, criticizing him for dating a black woman. The recording left no room for interpretation. The tone was angry, intentional, and laced with language historically associated with racial hatred. Major American news outlets circulated the tape widely, and public reaction was immediate. A&E, the network behind his hit series, suspended production almost instantly. Advertisers distanced themselves. Interviews once meant to promote the show transformed into attempts at damage control. Chapman issued several apologies, stating that the remarks reflected a moment of frustration and insisting he was not racist. But the severity of the language and the fact that it came from a private recording made many Americans question how closely his public persona aligned with his personal views. Civil rights organizations condemned the remarks. Fans debated whether Chapman's apology was sincere or strategically designed to salvage his career. Some religious and community leaders engaged with him in conversations about accountability and education, while others argued that such language revealed ingrained attitudes that could not be explained away. Chapman eventually returned to television in newer programs, but his reputation never fully recovered. The scandal became a defining chapter in his career, resurfacing repeatedly whenever discussions about racism in entertainment appeared in American media. Duane Chapman's story underscores the fragile nature of authenticity in reality television. The incident demonstrated how quickly a public figure, especially one who built his brand on moral judgment and personal transformation, can lose credibility when private conversations contradict the values they project on screen. 5. Ted Nugent. Ted Nugent has long been one of the most polarizing figures in American entertainment. Known first as a guitar-driven rock icon of the 1970s and 80s, he built a career on electrifying performances, unapologetic bravado, and a wild man persona that resonated strongly with a certain segment of American culture. Over time, Nugent became just as known for his outspoken political commentary as for his music, a shift that placed him at the center of national debates far beyond the stage. But among the many controversies that followed him, documented accusations of racist remarks and behavior have remained some of the most publicly scrutinized. Across the 2000s and 2010s, Nugent made a series of statements that major American news outlets labeled racially inflammatory. He criticized black public figures using language widely condemned as racist, made comments about immigration and minority communities that civil rights groups denounced, and used imagery in interviews that reinforced stereotypes. While Nugent repeatedly denied being racist and claimed his remarks were part of his political bluntness, the volume and consistency of the comments fueled ongoing backlash. Musicians, activists, and journalists pointed to specific incidents, including remarks aimed at President Barack Obama, that were widely circulated and condemned. Nugent's defenders insisted he was being targeted for his political views, but critics countered that the documented language crossed into overt racial hostility. Even organizations known for aligning with his political ideology publicly distanced themselves after certain statements drew national outrage. In the entertainment industry, Nugent's reputation grew increasingly divisive. Some venues declined to book him. Festivals removed him from lineups. His presence sparked protests, op-eds, and heated discussions about the line between free expression and hate speech. Despite the controversies, Nugent continued touring, leaning into his role as a cultural provocateur. But mainstream recognition of his musical legacy became overshadowed by his public persona and the backlash that surrounded it. Today, Ted Nugent's career stands as a stark example of how repeated public remarks preserved across televised interviews, archived articles, and digital recordings can reshape a celebrity's legacy. For many Americans, the controversies define him more than his contributions to rock music. His story highlights the enduring impact of documented rhetoric in an age where public statements never truly disappear. 4. Charlie Sheen. Charlie Sheen was once one of the highest-paid actors in American television, known for his sharp comedic timing, confident swagger, and undeniable screen presence. From blockbuster films to long-running sitcom success, Sheen built a career that blended charisma with controversy, making him a constant figure in American pop culture. But beneath the headlines about wild behavior, substance struggles, and public meltdowns lies a documented history of racially charged incidents that significantly damaged his reputation and raised questions about his off-screen conduct. One of the most widely reported controversies came during his public feud with Two and a Half Men creator Chuck Lorre. In a series of heated interviews, Sheen referred to Lorre using a name linked to anti-Semitic stereotypes. The remarks, circulated instantly by major American news outlets, drew widespread condemnation. Critics argued that his language reflected racist undertones, not just personal anger. Industry leaders, advocacy groups, and commentators highlighted how harmful such terminology was, especially coming from a major television star. Sheen's history also included other allegations of racially insensitive behavior, documented in various reports across the 2000s and 2010s. Former associates and partners accused him of making derogatory comments, incidents that were covered by entertainment media, and contributed to growing concerns about his volatility. While Sheen denied some allegations and disputed others, the documented remarks amplified a narrative that his off-camera life was far more troubling than the comedic characters he portrayed. Hollywood's response was swift and decisive. Production on his sitcom halted, networks distanced themselves, and Sheen's once steady presence in major projects evaporated. What had been framed for years as eccentricity or self-destructive humor transformed into something more serious in the eyes of the public. Commentators revisited his past statements, re-evaluating them through the lens of racism, accountability, and celebrity privilege. Although Sheen attempted various comebacks, his career never returned to its former height. His story became a cautionary chapter in conversations about fame, mental health, public behavior, and the consequences of harmful language, especially when the remarks are preserved in interviews and widely circulated across American media. Today, Sheen remains a complex figure, talented, troubled, and permanently marked by the documented controversies that reshaped his legacy. His case illustrates how even well-established stars can lose public trust when their words reveal prejudice rather than persona. 3. John Mayer. John Mayer rose to fame as one of the most respected guitarists and singer-songwriters of the early 2000s. His musicianship, emotional ballads, and undeniable technical skill earned him Grammy Awards, sold-out tours, and a reputation as one of the most influential artists of his generation. For many Americans, Mayer was the image of a sensitive, introspective performer, someone whose artistry felt deeply personal. But a single interview would reveal comments that dramatically shifted public perception and sparked one of the biggest controversies of his career. The incident occurred during a widely circulated Playboy interview in the early 2010s. When discussing his dating life, Mayer used racially charged language, including a slur referring to black women. He also made remarks about his hood pass, a term criticized for trivializing black culture. The quotes were explicit, published in print, and instantly picked up by major American news outlets. For many readers, The statements were shocking not only for their racial insensitivity, but also for their arrogance and casual tone. The backlash was fast and overwhelming. Black artists, cultural commentators, and fans condemned the remarks. Social media ignited with criticism, while journalists questioned how a public figure known for emotional vulnerability could express views so dismissive and offensive. Mayer issued a public apology, acknowledging that his language was reckless, that he had acted like a jerk, and that he deeply regretted hurting people. But for many, the interview left a lasting stain. The controversy affected his image more than any musical shift or personal relationship ever had. In the years that followed, Mayer stepped back from public life, focusing on self-reflection, therapy, and what he later described as personal growth. While he slowly rebuilt his career collaborating with major artists and joining Dead & Company, the Playboy remarks remained a reference point in discussions about celebrities and racial insensitivity. Today, Mayer's story stands as a reminder that even a single documented interview can reshape a public figure's legacy. His case continues to be cited in conversations about accountability, cultural awareness, and the responsibilities that come with fame in the digital age. For many Americans, the interview remains a pivotal moment that permanently complicated his public narrative. 2. Melania Trump. Melania Trump entered American public life as a model before becoming First Lady of the United States, a transition that placed her under intense national scrutiny. Throughout her time in the White House, she maintained a notably private, reserved public persona, often positioning herself as a counterbalance to the chaos that surrounded the administration. Her Be Best anti-bullying initiative and carefully managed public appearances shaped an image of elegance and restraint. But documented controversies connected to racial insensitivity, both directly and indirectly, have continued to influence public discussions about her legacy. One of the most widely discussed incidents involved Melania's defense of the birther conspiracy theory, a movement that falsely questioned President Barack Obama's citizenship. While Melania insisted she did not intend racial harm, critics argued that the birther claims were deeply rooted in racist narratives, questioning the legitimacy of America's first black president. Interviews in which she entertained those claims were covered widely by major American media networks, cementing the association between her statements and a racially charged political movement. Another significant moment occurred when she wore a jacket printed with "I really don't care, do you?" during a visit to a migrant child detention center in the 2010s. While Melania later stated the message was aimed at critics, the timing and context led to widespread condemnation. Many advocacy groups and commentators described the choice as insensitive to the plight of non-white children separated from their families, sparking a national debate about empathy, symbolism, and racial implications in political messaging. Her public alignment with policies targeting immigrant communities, such as support for increased border enforcement, also intensified criticism, particularly given her own immigrant background. Analysts across major American news outlets debated whether her actions reflected complicity, indifference, or a broader ideological stance. Supporters argued that Melania was unfairly targeted due to political hostility and insisted she was misunderstood. Critics countered that her statements and symbolic choices contributed to racially charged narratives and demonstrated a pattern of insensitivity. Today, Melania Trump's legacy remains sharply divided. For some, she represents elegance amid political turmoil. For others, her involvement in movements and moments with racial implications complicates her public image. Her story reflects the broader reality that actions, statements, and even wardrobe choices, when recorded, circulated, and re-examined, can carry lasting cultural impact and shape how history remembers a First Lady. 1. Kanye West. Kanye West began his career as one of the most influential forces in modern American music. A groundbreaking producer, a bold lyricist, and a cultural disruptor, he reshaped hip-hop through innovation and emotional transparency. His early albums earned critical acclaim, Grammy Awards, and a reputation for artistic genius. For years, West stood at the center of American pop culture, unpredictable, controversial, but undeniably impactful. Yet as his career evolved, so did the scrutiny, and eventually documented remarks involving racist rhetoric and anti-Semitic themes would create the most devastating fallout of his life. The turning point came in the early 2020s when West made a series of public statements targeting Jewish communities. These remarks were recorded in interviews, live streams, and social media posts, leaving no ambiguity about his words. Major American outlets reported them immediately, and civil rights organizations condemned the rhetoric as classic anti-Semitic conspiracy language with dangerous historical roots. The backlash was swift, intense, and global. Corporate partners severed ties almost overnight. Adidas ended its multi-billion-dollar partnership, Gap pulled its merchandise, and talent agencies dropped him. For the first time in his career, the consequences were not limited to public criticism. They became financial, professional, and structural. Commentators across political and entertainment landscapes debated how someone once celebrated for artistic brilliance could articulate views so harmful and historically loaded. Supporters argued that West's mental health struggles played a role in his outbursts, a narrative he himself invoked in interviews. But critics responded that mental illness does not excuse hate speech, especially speech with such deeply dangerous implications. Jewish organizations, historians, and public figures emphasized the gravity of his remarks, particularly given his influence on young audiences. For many Americans, the contrast between the visionary artist who created culturally defining work and the man expressing hateful rhetoric was jarring. West's legacy, once centered on innovation, shifted dramatically. While he continues to create music and maintain a dedicated fan base, the widespread consequences of his publicly documented comments have permanently altered how Hollywood and the broader public treat him. Today, Kanye West stands as one of the most dramatic examples of how racist and anti-Semitic rhetoric, when spoken by a major celebrity and preserved across multiple platforms, can dismantle a career once seen as untouchable. His story is a stark reminder that influence amplifies responsibility, and words can reshape a legacy forever. In Hollywood, reputations are shaped by the spotlight, but they can just as quickly be destroyed by what the spotlight eventually reveals. Each story in this countdown shows how documented words, actions, or choices can leave a lasting mark, no matter how powerful or beloved a celebrity once was. Legacies change, public trust shifts, and the truth, when it surfaces, rarely fades. If you want to continue exploring the hidden history of fame, the scandals, the contradictions, and the uncomfortable realities, make sure to subscribe. Previous episodes and related deep dive documentaries are linked in the description below.